What's a breakout for Bitcoin? Hitting $64,000 here on the Binance chart, and it doesn't show us any signs of slowing down just yet. This is a fantastic thing to see with that bearish pattern being put to bed. I'm going to go through the technical analysis on BTC, sharing my thoughts and opinions on where I think it is heading. Let's roll the intro, then get right down into it. Hi guys, welcome back to another Bitcoin video update. Today we are of course taking a look at the technical analysis on BTC. Obviously, we had our bearish ascending wedge pattern here. That is this one here that's basically trades inside here and then breaks down. And that has been broken, which is fantastic to see. This basically means that this bearish pattern that we were tracking, we've had the breakout now. We might retest the trend line, so I might leave that in place for a little bit. But for the most part, this is an incredibly bullish place to be for BTC. Now, it doesn't negate the idea of corrections because this market is basically hanging by a thread, unfortunately. But, you know, we've been through that many times already. At the moment, the Bitcoin spot ETFs are the main fuel to basically, stoking this fire. And it's really just driven from the fact that the shares in the Bitcoin spot ETF, these are the shares that are being purchased on the stock market by your investors. They are basically required to buy Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin, the ETF itself is holding Bitcoin. And the demand that is coming in for the Bitcoin shares or the ETF shares are so high, it exceeds the amount of Bitcoin that is produced daily. Okay, so although the demand for Bitcoin is low, the Bitcoin spot ETF is essentially fueling this move to the upside with so much more demand in the Bitcoin spot ETF than the new Bitcoin being mined can basically deal with, right? So there's an imbalance between the supply, the new supply that's coming in, and of course the demand for the Bitcoin spot ETF. Okay, now the traditional spot volumes are actually really low outside of the Bitcoin spot ETF, and we've been through this a number of different times. We're in higher high territory, but volumes are going lower highs. This is a divergence and shows us weakness on a macro scale. So what goes up does eventually come down. Now, we don't know what that looks like because this is new territory. We haven't seen this kind of thing before for Bitcoin, right? In the same way that we were discussing this back in 2022 and 2023, there's a lot of new variables for Bitcoin. We can't just look at Bitcoin's history now and say history is repeating itself. This time is different, as they say. Ultimately, Bitcoin, for the first time in its history, went down lower than its previous all-time high in 2022, something that had never happened before, but it happened for the first time in 2022. Alongside that, we also saw some underlying variable changes. For example, in Bitcoin's history leading up to 2022, we hadn't seen Bitcoin drop down lower than the 1.236 fib extension level. Yet in 2022, we saw us go down lower than the 1.382 fib extension level. Now, these are really minor things for anyone who doesn't understand technical analysis, but from a TA point of view, actually, those are fundamental changes at a granular level that basically tell us that we can't look at historical indicators for repeating out what's going to happen next, because ultimately those variables, just a couple of them, they change the behavior of Bitcoin. Then, of course, we can layer in the bigger macro piece, such as Bitcoin spot ETF. These things are going to cause Bitcoin's price action to be very different to what we've ever seen before. And so we are looking at the market and we're saying, look, volumes are decreasing whilst we're going up into higher highs. This kind of gets a lot of retail investors to feel that FOMO and to kind of feel like, in that kind of euphoric moment. But it does, historically anyway, have concerns that are associated with it. When we've gone up to these kind of levels and we see these kind of really big moves in the market, like these ones here, historically speaking, they've been leading us up into new higher highs and new kind of fantastic kind of euphoric moments. However, with decreasing volume and only the Bitcoin spot ETF really kind of fueling these moves, that is a huge concern. It basically allows us to look at the market through a centralized lens. If something happens to the stock market and to the Bitcoin spot ETF, then there is absolutely nothing to stop a free fall of an absolutely meteoric extent. I mean, it's going to blow people's minds that the price is going to fall that hard, that fast. There is no buying pressure to stop a free fall should the people who have been buying the shares in the Bitcoin spot ETF decide to liquidate their assets. If they do that, there is nothing to stop the Bitcoin free fall. Okay, there's not enough people currently in the crypto market to stop such a dump. So we need to be very mindful. What goes up does go down. It's great that we've had this breakout to the upside, but we are nearing completion of a technical move to the upside. Now, that might absolutely be garbage at this point because, as I said earlier, the Bitcoin spot ETFs are new. We can't look at history in the same way, and they are continuously buying Bitcoin at an alarming rate. And if they continue to do this for the next 3 months, then Bitcoin may actually hit $100,000 before we see that sell moment for that Bitcoin spot ETF. And we want to be very, very aware that this is a fantastic place to be in, but the money that's going into Bitcoin through the Bitcoin spot ETF isn't going to roll out of Bitcoin and go into altcoins. Okay, what's going into the Bitcoin spot ETF is stock market money. It will stay in the stock market. So until we have more spot ETFs for the likes of Ethereum, Cardano, Solana, Matic, for example, Chainlink, until we see ETFs for those assets, we're not really going to see money rolling out of the Bitcoin spot ETF, coming out of the stock market and going into the crypto market. That's not going to happen. That is why we are seeing a lot of altcoins not really rallying anywhere near the same extent as Bitcoin has. Many altcoins haven't rallied up anywhere near their previous all-time highs, whereas Bitcoin continues to go on a rampage towards $69,000. So let's be very open-minded to what is potentially going to happen here. As we rewrite Bitcoin's history, we have no rule book to kind of lean on to say this is categorically going to be happening. But what we can do is say that anyone who is in the traditional kind of crypto space and has been in here for a while will be looking at the chart saying, look, we're probably about to have some kind of major correction to the downside. Nothing moves in straight lines. However, we cannot rule out the Bitcoin spot ETF effect, where basically stock market continues to buy up shares in the Bitcoin spot ETF. The Bitcoin spot ETF continues to buy up Bitcoin and continues to store it. And as a result, we have an insufficient supply and an increase in demand. So ultimately, price has been pushing up quite nicely. And do we see a new all-time high on the horizon? Well, yeah, I do. I actually think we are now in a position where we can see new all-time highs before a major correction is coming. And so it's incredibly bullish, right? If we're in Bitcoin and we got in super early like we did down in Cheeky Crypto's Discord, you'll know that Chris was buying Bitcoin at, I think it's like $15,700, something like that. Some fantastic buys on many of those altcoins as well, including places like Ethereum, even though I'm not a big fan of ETH. It is the next one that is going to have very similar effects. So we look at Bitcoin here and we can say when the Ethereum spot ETFs go, we're going to see some very similar moves. So we're in new territory. This time, believe it or not, is different, right? We don't want to believe it, but it is unfortunately different. And so this move to the upside, yeah, I can see us kind of fueling this up towards and higher than $69,000. Now, don't get me wrong. We saw a pretty big correction when we hit $64,000 yesterday, right? A lot of volume did come in and we dropped down very, very quickly, 8.28%. So we saw a very sharp correction here, but it has been chewed up. We have continued to rally back up since. So a very minor move here for BTC. So for the most part, Our stochastics are showing us with still a continued move potential to the upside here. I would expect reversal on this. I'll see how that kind of plays out. Let's go ahead and throw in our divergence indicator. Our RSI is, of course, well overbought. So we are looking for corrections here, but I do expect a new all-time high before we get there. And the volume profiles, well, you can see here, if I zoom out of this, it'll give you scale as to kind of why I say the volumes are really low. You can see right here just how insignificant the volumes are versus where they were previously. And we are not talking a massive amount of time. This is just March of 2023 when we had that initial surge to the upside after the AI narrative, and this is where we are now as we enter into March 2024. This is quite a clear graph. We can see that we've gone up significantly higher, yet the volumes are significantly lower. This is consistent across the different exchanges. This is a Binance data chart, which basically Binance being the biggest in terms of volume that is pushed through it on a day-by-day basis is a very clear indication as to what is going on. But this is consistent across multiple exchanges. Even if you take a look at Coinbase, Kraken, OKX, you take a look at any of these exchanges, you see very similar data. It's more prominent here on Binance due to how big Binance is. And Binance is the biggest exchange in the world still by volume. Okay, so understanding that this is the problem with the biggest exchange, obviously the problem scales differently depending on the exchanges, but the problem is still there nonetheless. Price has been pushing up as less Bitcoin is available for purchase. And well, we can argue, we can easily kind of label things manipulation, but ultimately here, reality of the situation is that there is an insufficient amount of Bitcoin available for purchase. And as a result, the Bitcoin spot ETFs are having to buy it from wherever they can. And if the price is higher, then the price has to go to wherever the sellers are in order to buy the Bitcoin required. It's a really interesting time for Bitcoin, and it's great to kind of see so much progression within BTC and within the space. But let's be also really realistic. The money at the moment doesn't appear to roll into altcoins. We have many altcoins that are a fraction of their all-time highs, and it is a more clear indication as to where the crypto market is. If we take Bitcoin out of the equation and we take a look at just altcoins, we can actually see the crypto market performing very differently. And ultimately what we see here for Bitcoin, although great, is just a stock market play. And my concerns with that are that what is being purchased through an investment vehicle on the stock market will eventually be sold off, whether that is tomorrow, next week, next month, 2 months, a year, 10 years. I don't know what people's strategies are, but profit has been made, and pretty significant amounts of profit are being made or has been made. And at some point, those investors are going to be taking profits. And when they take profits, there isn't much to be stopping the price of Bitcoin falling. Let me know what your thoughts are on all of this in the comments down below. And why don't you check out this video here where I'm discussing a potential breakout situation for Cardano's ADA.